If you are new here and you have not seen the interview, I guess it was kind of an interview with the Israeli soldier. I guess you could call him special forces. He's a lot of things. Spent a long time, his whole life basically, um, involved with martial arts, involved with both law enforcement and the military on the Israeli side, or is in Israel, and then Canada and the United States for martial arts and things of that nature. He was at one point, I think, kind of above the or in charge of the Israeli counterterrorism hostage rescue school, and he taught a lot there. And in that conversation that we had, kind of sitting there and hearing it all, um, there wasn't a lot of opportunity for me to interject and ask many questions. Um, so I had a lot of notes, and I never really got to a lot of the things that I wanted to ask him or even talk about because um, had I brought up some of the things that he was talking about at the point in which it was available for me to do that, I would have had to go back, track several minutes, 20, 30 minutes, and ask something that was brought up, and it didn't quite seem relevant or make a lot of sense. So I did not really get a chance to, ask as many questions or discuss as many of the things as I would like to. So that's why by the time it got to me, I was like, well, that was a lot of stuff, and I don't really know where to start. So I had to basically erase a bunch of the notes that I had taken and kind of just pick out whatever I thought was most relevant in that particular moment. And so I think I was able to do that in a way. But I thought it was important to not interrupt him and let him kind of talk about the things in which he wanted to talk about and the way in which he wanted to talk about them. But I'll definitely have him back on again to discuss future topics surrounding tactics and law enforcement and CQB. But a lot of the things I've listened to it several times. So I listened to it. Well, when you're editing it, you have to listen to the whole thing because otherwise, you don't know if you're missing a part. If something went wrong, you didn't catch it, and then you don't want to publish something that is not the best. So you're sitting there, you're getting the information, you're trying to have this conversation and discuss these topics. And then once it's all over with, I have to re-listen to it again and basically edit it while I'm listening to it, and then probably have to listen to it one more time with the edits in there to make sure it's correct. And I think there's only one part in that whole 2.5 hours, I think it was, where I forgot to didn't realize I missed like zooming in. So there's one portion of that video where you see he is smaller than the actual frame. I didn't catch that, so that's in there. But even since then, I listened to it again. I actually listened to it. I did a premiere and I listened to it as it was airing, I guess you call it, and was there to answer any questions, although there was not many questions. So I got to listen to it again. And I think that time in which I listened to our conversation was probably the best time for me to actually think about the things that he was saying. And so I got an opportunity to do that. And there was a lot of things that he said that I didn't quite catch at the time. Or again, like so much time had passed that, I forgot that he had mentioned it, right? And so, and I even think like at the time there was probably things that he said that I was like, well, I'm not quite sure about that. And then as time goes on, or as listening to it again, I start to make more sense of it. And had somebody messaging me, a friend of mine, and further discussing that conversation that me and Near had. Again, if you're just joining, that conversation is on the YouTube channel or on Spotify. It's the most recent video. Israeli IDF soldier discusses war in Gaza, combat tactics, and CQB. So you can go listen to that if that's something that you want to do. And I think a lot of the things, or even you post something on YouTube or whatever, like one of the things that people saw immediately was his optic was in the photo. It's very far forward, more traditionally, farther forward traditionally than our own, where we like to place our own red dots, right? And he messaged me explaining why. And, first of all, if anybody has any idea of kind of like the kind of person that I am, you know that I really don't care. I really don't care where you wear your gear, what kind of gear you have, what you like, what you don't like. I mean, there's definitely some common practices that you want to try to align yourselves with. But ultimately, it's kind of the up to the individual to decide what they like and why they like it, and have a good reason as to why. Like, be able to explain as to why you're setting it up this way, or you're because if you can't explain why, you're like, I don't know, I'm just doing it. Well, then that's not a good thing. But as far as just that goes, like his optic being far forward, again, like I said, that's out of the norm, right? But what he said, and it makes sense, right, is that and if you go look at Israel's, war in Gaza now, and the CQB and the combat tactics and the urban warfare that's going on right now, you get the idea of, like, bad guys can be anywhere, and they are, right? They're shooting out of small holes in buildings, on top of rooftops, like everywhere, right? So you really have to have a higher degree of situational awareness, right? And so what he said was, essentially, having my optic farther forward allows me to not obstruct my vision when I am shooting through my optic. And I think, like, on the United States side, or American side of things, we don't typically have that kind of problem, or really kind of thinking about that problem in that way. Usually when we're getting down behind our optic, we're engaging a specific threat in a specific area. And so it doesn't take a whole lot of understanding to realize that if you push your optic farther forward, then that's going to give you the obvious ability, as you're looking through your optic, to still be able to catch things happening out of your peripheral vision. And in the United States, or inside CQB, or inside when we're dealing with a specific person in a specific area, maybe not a big deal, but I could see where that could be a big deal to people in urban warfare, where, again, engaging, still delivering rounds, and a lot of the time, look, that's the difference between the military and law enforcement in combat, is that a lot of times we're shooting, like, at that building, shooting at that window, shooting at windows, right? Not necessarily shooting at a particular person all the time, because we oftentimes don't know where they're at. And so one of those things, again, that was brought up that I thought was very relevant was, of course, him having his optic farther forward. And you might go, well, okay, that still doesn't really make sense to me that he is doing that as an individual. Well, if you go look at combat footage in Israel, a lot of their soldiers have their optics farther forward. And so a lot of times, I think, we're dealing with people on the internet that have opinions, and that's fine. But oftentimes, and I've said this over and over again in podcasts and wherever, it's you really just try to remain objective, which is why I don't really have strong opinions about other people or what they're doing and this, that, and the other, because oftentimes there's a reasonable explanation for it. So something that could catch your attention and go, oh, that's really dumb, I wouldn't do that. There could be a logical reason, and that does make sense. So that was, like, kind of just the first thing that jumped out. I mean, that happened before the video was even, like, as the video launched and was playing, like, somebody pointed that out in the comments, like, oh, like, I've seen everything I need to see because his optics farther forward. Like, it's crazy. Wild that you never heard of that before, because you definitely taught me stuff. No, I'm not. I mean, look, like I said, it makes sense, but I would just say, yeah, I guess, I mean, I haven't really thought about it, but it just makes sense. I mean, but that's outside of the norms of what we normally, do in the United States, I would say, or in law enforcement. Like if somebody showed up to a class with their optic that way, they would be ridiculed basically. And I maybe like I would have to kind of hear like the different perspective and points as to like, yeah, that's okay from over there because that's combat and that's a different like threat. But here, this is why we prefer to have it this way, right? So I think there could be a logical explanation for both. I think it's fine to have it forward, but if you have it forward on the handguard, there is a chance you lose a 0 or no. Yeah, maybe so. That's a valid point. But I'm not quite sure, to be honest with you. But that does make sense. If your handguard is not like, I don't want to say pinned and welded necessarily isn't probably the proper term, then there could be a chance that it doesn't hold a 0. So that might be something that, makes that something that you might not want to be doing. I'm not sure. Some of the Special Forces units don't even have the luxury of using optics, only iron sights. Yeah, and I think if you're talking like Israel, obviously, I did notice that, some of the rifles even that they're using are like old. But it's hard to tell who we're looking at. I assume most of the footage is more or less, typical frontline soldiers. Definitely mentality from LEO to combat arms. Handguard can flex, need handguard. It's an issue with a laser under MVG. Yeah, there's all kinds of variables that could be, that need to be accounted for in order to make that, again, a viable option. And, I'm not sure. I wouldn't be able to answer the question just at face value of what was said to me of being able to see. That does make sense. But you brought up some valid points. One of the other things that he said in that video that we're going to talk about here, I'm going to show you this video, is something that I'd never thought about. And I had a conversation with my buddy about that particular thing that I'm going to tell you now. And then I made kind of the connection between a video that I posted before and kind of an issue that he was talking about. Now, in his video, in the podcast, he talked a lot about, Israeli tactics and how they do things. And it's hard to sit there and really understand what it is. Like he said in the video, it'd be easier to like demonstrate it. And I've seen videos. There's Project Gecko on Instagram and forget the other YouTube channel. But there's a lot of, there is Israeli stuff out there that you can see. But one of the things that he was talking about was getting your muzzle past the threshold when kind of like trying to identify threats inside of a room and thinking about engaging those threats. And traditionally, again, in the United States, or the ways that I've been taught, and how you've seen me doing these things in my videos, is that they kind of, what he says is, you want to make sure your rounds are going into that room, right? Now, we already talked about the likelihood that somebody's grabbing your muzzle. And before we had that podcast, me and him had talked about that thing. And, one of the things that I said, look, if I enter a room and the bad guy grabs my muzzle, like that's the least of the things that I'm concerned about. And so, look, what happens when somebody grabs your muzzle, right? Say your rifle. Say you enter the room and somebody grabs your muzzle. Well, if they don't have a weapon in their hand, right, that could be serious bodily injury or death, right? They're grabbing your gun, so you could transition to your sidearm. But ultimately, if we're going to fight over my gun, it's just going to be a wrestling match as everybody else kind of piles on top. But again, like if they're grabbing my muzzle, they're probably not shooting me. Therefore, I think we're already in good shape. And, I think he said in the podcast, and I replied, and I thought it was kind of funny. He said, have you ever heard of anybody grabbing, bad guy grabbing somebody's muzzle? And I'm telling you, like, I have not. I've not heard that happen. I've heard of, like, bad guys getting close to a person and them either muzzle thumping them or kicking them. But I have never heard of a bad guy grabbing somebody's muzzle. But there are other people out there, organizations or whatever, that, basically imply that happens all the time. Specifically guys hiding behind thresholds with Makarovs, okay? I don't know that that's the case. I don't feel like that's an honest statement, okay? So beyond the person grabbing the muzzle, which is kind of the, the explanation, right, as to why you don't want your muzzle to go past, which I think is the worst kind of excuse, right? I don't like that one. The other one that I'm kind of still a fan of is the idea of exposing yourself or letting the bad guy know that you're there, right? And I'm not talking about when we make entry and we're exposing our rifle. I'm talking about when we are just kind of doing that scan from the outside, right? So the way in which he was describing it, again, this is just going off of how I imagine it, was that when they clear thresholds, they have their muzzle inside of the room, kind of, or at least broken the threshold, or at least in a position to where they're not going to shoot the threshold. And again, listening to that at the first time, I definitely thought it was odd. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, all these things that I already mentioned about overexposing yourself and somebody seeing you. But he said, we want to make sure that we're delivering these rounds where they need to go. And if I'm hitting any part of the threshold, those rounds aren't going where they need to go. And I definitely agree with that. In my, just as a basic fundamental understanding is like, if there's a bad guy in a room and we are engaging this person with our rifle, we want to make sure that there's no wasted time and effort. So we have to make sure these rounds are actually impacting, right? And if they're hitting the threshold, they're not doing that. And my mind reverted to, okay, well, that's just a training problem, right? You just need to make sure that you have done it enough and that you're not hitting, your rounds aren't hitting off the threshold. Let me read these comments real quick and I'll jump back into it. I'm getting too far ahead. I don't know who this video is from, but we're going to watch it. Recent sub, thoughts on high port versus low port? I'll answer that in a second. Okay, I guess I'll answer it now. I mean, it doesn't really matter, high port or low port. I mean, this is really a longer conversation. I think like if you're the number one guy, you could be, high port is fine if that's what you want to do. When I'm moving around vehicles, a high port is kind of what I just kind of go to. In a real life situation that I had, and the reason for the high port is this explanation, and this is kind of specific to like being, outside, I guess, more or less, is, if we have to run after somebody with our rifle, which I've had to do before, right? You could just kind of man the rifle and kind of run with it, right? But if you need to communicate on the radio, you can't run with your rifle down. And so a common position when we reload is to kind of put our rifle underneath our arm. And because that's a common position, then it makes sense to utilize that same position when you are in a number of different situations where it's also applicable. That way, we keep things the same, right? Don't want to say, well, in this situation I do this, and in this situation I do that. So we reload with our rifle underneath our arm. Now, one of the conversations I have in my classes is if we are, let's say you're going for the fastest reload, one round, reload, one round, right? And you're doing that with the person next to you on the range. You're probably not going to unshoulder your rifle, right? Because that kind of does waste a little bit of time, right? Having to bring it down, reload, bring it back up into your shoulder. Most people are just going to keep the rifle in their shoulder, just kind of manhandle it and do the reload, which is great for competition purposes, but very impractical thing that you could expect to do in real life. Now, we could argue on the law enforcement side, the chances of you having to reload your rifle and actually have to do it right now, like in whatever point, whatever seconds, super unlikely, first of all. But if we do have to reload, if we do have to, clear a malfunction in our rifle, if we have to communicate on our radio, right? Well, the best way to do that with a rifle is to put it up underneath your arm where it's secure. You have positive control of it. And you could also run after people. You could point at people, tell people to get back. You could do whatever, right? So in and around vehicles, I've traditionally done that high port, and it just works out better that way for me. But like it does seem odd to me that and unnecessary, actually, for people behind the first guy to be in a high port situation. I don't understand really. I think that would take a lot of trust and training, first of all, which is not practical, right? And then also, depending on the size of individuals, right? I'm short. I'm like 5'6". So if there's a 6-foot person in front of me and he's 1 and I'm 2, and I don't know which way he's going, high port becomes a problem. I mean, and most people don't enter a high port with the rifle straight up in the air. It's right. So it doesn't really matter, but you have to be able to complete the task. So it doesn't matter either way. At the point in which you enter into the room, you need to have your muzzle pointed in that direction. Doesn't really matter. I hope that answers your question. If you guys are listening right now and you want to help support the live stream or the channel, go ahead and drop a like. That would be helpful. Thank you. All right. So human behavior is someone assaulting. Their reaction is going to be either flee or fight, and those who fight would just dig in. I read a thesis from lots of LEA, and most suspects are. You got to clarify that, dude. I can't understand what you said. Appreciate the comment, though, but I don't understand what you're saying. Just like maybe there's a language issue. From the threshold dug in. Okay. I'll come back. I think I can answer your question. Gravity also assists you on target from high. Easier to drop the rifle than raise from a low ready. Situation dependent. Yeah, all that stuff. I have a video on, different ready positions. You need to train all the ready positions because you could find yourself in these positions at any given time for any given reason. They don't all make sense in all situations all the time. That's pretty much that. Someone is assaulting, their reaction is going to... I'm not sure. I think you're just saying that people will fight where they're at. Anyways, so let me get into what I was saying about the threshold, right? So he's talking about your muzzle going past the threshold in order to make sure those rounds go to where they need to go. I get that. I'm down with that. That's one of the things we talk about in my class when I'm teaching these officers these vehicle, tactics and how, the goal is how fast can we put accurate rounds on target. That is the metric for somebody who's trying to hurt you. So how do we achieve that the most effective way? And in the situations in my class, in the vehicle class, the way that I explain it is if your muzzle is not past your door or your whatever it is, or you don't understand your sight over bore and because you don't punch your muzzle out far enough and there is your round hits your car. That happens in training, right? Like if we get a car and we have officers shoot, like they'll do that. They'll hit their car. They hit the barricade on the range, which is something that he explains. And I tell the students, like, if you're in a gunfight or you're fighting for your life and, you need to be delivering rounds and, rounds are coming at you and you hit your car, nobody cares. Like, I don't care, the department might care because they're going to be like, hey, you damaged our car. Some guys might give you some crap for it, but no, it's irrelevant. Like, there's a lot of things that can happen that people could like, oh man, you did that it doesn't matter, right? Because I'm trying to go home, trying to stop the threat. Nothing else matters. Okay, so the problem isn't the fact that you goofed up, right? The problem is that round is not going where you want it to, and therefore delaying how fast we can accurately put rounds on target. Thanks, Don. So, anyways, in the video, in the conversation, the podcast that we had, he's talking about this idea of, well, if those rounds aren't going in, that's the problem. But then he talks about rounds ricocheting off of the threshold and hitting the person shooting or hitting somebody next to him. And I think he said they've had a lot of people that got killed that way. And immediately I thought that idea was probably, just seemed impractical. Like, it just seemed like, well, if I'm shooting at the threshold or inside the room outside and then the round hits the threshold, like, that sucks, but the round's going to get lodged there or whatever. And then I remembered a video that I've been posting. I'll probably have it in this next video coming up, where I talk about, or I show a video of the Project Gecko guy shooting from outside into the room with a pistol at basically point blank range. He's hitting the threshold, and that round is bouncing off, and it goes to the other side of the threshold where somebody else would be standing if you were cross coverage. And like when I was talking to my buddy about that, I kind of made that connection. I was like, holy crap, like that's a freaking problem. You know, I didn't realize that that could be the thing. Now, like, what are the odds, right? I don't know that I've ever been in a training situation and, you know, either myself or somebody else has engaged from outside and those rounds didn't go in, right? And so maybe it's a solution to a problem that we, at least over here, don't have to deal with. But I definitely think it's worth something considering. Now, in this video that I'm about to play you, you're going to see that thing happen. Now, he's using a pistol, so I don't really think that there is a solution to that problem as far as getting your muzzle past, which is something that me and Near did not talk about. I didn't think about at the time. I was kind of just thinking rifles. And so, again, I'm not telling you this is the way or you should do it this way. I'm just having a conversation with you guys about that idea and just being objective. And I'm not coming to any conclusions. I'm not changing anything I'm doing. But I think that it's a interesting, you know, concept to think about. And by the way, this video, I don't know, I came across, this isn't the first time I've seen it, but it's a really good representation of like scanning rooms. And then, you know, he's basically demonstrating the sectors as he's shooting the targets in those sectors on how he would do it. And I think it's a really good systematic, you know, view of how you would, you know, do something like this. But in this next frame here, you're going to see that one of his rounds hits the threshold by where he's firing. So you guys saw that he hit the threshold again. Maybe that round goes inside. I don't know if rounds will bounce back. It seems impractical. But surely if you're set up cross coverage like that, and that is a legit threshold, just like the Project Gecko guy showed, it could very well bounce off and hit somebody next to you. I think more of a concern if you end up in a position where you're with other people and they are not trained, right? Maybe there's a whole bunch of other issues that you're also trying to contend with at that point. So it says the video is from John Sherbert, a former Green Beret in the 7th SFG, by the way. Wasn't a direct strike. Right. And I think like not being a direct strike is probably the problem, right? Because if it's directly impacting, there's probably less chance it's going to actually veer off one direction. Don't know for sure, but that could be the case. If you guys are in here in this chat, in this live stream, and you want to help out the channel, drop a like in here, get some more people in here. If you have any questions about anything police-related, tactics, training, military as well, go ahead and ask it. If you listened to the last podcast with the Israeli Special Forces soldier, you had any questions about that or an opinion, go ahead and drop it also into the chat. Height over bore matters with pistols. That's an interesting thing that I have not really explored, but the concept probably still remains the same. But, I mean, if we're shooting, we should be having our pistol straight up and down. So, and also the barriers straight up and down. So, unless you can't your pistol one direction, then I don't know necessarily if that's an issue that we would have to contend with. I'm gonna see if I can find other videos on here while we're talking about this. So here's one of the things that I've learned, right? So you guys have probably
And then you have a 45.
or if you're on the Instagram, sorry, I know you heard the sound, but you guys have probably heard me say this. If you're on the Instagram, mostly is kind of where I talk about this stuff. But I don't really care about who people are or what they've done or what their background is. I mean, in a certain degree, it matters. But ultimately, each individual person, you guys, as students or subscribers or whatever, I understand that a lot of people have different experiences, and some people are just, I mean, I could have somebody who takes care of works at a lawn care business watching this who really doesn't have much information to add and doesn't really know what questions to ask because they don't have any training or any experience, and therefore those pointing those things out or understanding that is kind of obvious. But I happen to know who this is, Ronan, but I don't really confide in people. I just look at the information and compare it to what we know and what I know and give opinions based off of that, absent of who they are. I think that people can get very kind of caught up or starstruck over people. And, you guys probably see that. And I don't have an issue with it. I want every man that is trying to earn something, who is trying to become something, who's trying to create something, who's trying to build something to get everything that they want, in their life, either for themselves or for other people. And that's why, I have a lot to say about a lot of individuals, but I don't. Because I see other guys acting in that way, other men acting in that way, and to me it's distasteful, especially when it's not really warranted, and it seems like, it seems like it's being done in a way in which it's like, hey, we don't want you to pay attention to that guy. We don't want you to listen to what he's saying. This is what he's done. This is where he's at. This is why he's here. But they never really talk about the information being provided, right? And all that is an opportunity for them to try and make themselves, I guess, look better. And so I don't know if I'll ever share, information that I have or believe about other individuals. I think that this industry or this community or whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of things that go on that people don't really know about or understand because they're not, they're not really in it. They're just kind of consumers of it. But there's a lot of selfishness that goes on. There's a lot of people doing things that, perceivably are in the best interest of themselves. And so, if I come across a video on here or anywhere, I've done that. I did that with the, rifle underneath the arm video that I made. And it's like, we can quickly debunk a lot of these things, based on practicality. But what they won't really do is have a conversation about the thing, right? They'll talk about you, they'll talk about, this or that, but once they're presented with an opinion that is perceivably in contradiction with what they're saying, they will not talk about that because that kind of makes them, in a way, look bad to people who are able to identify, yeah, that's probably not a good idea, right? So the switching or putting the rifle underneath your arm, video that I had, with said person or people that were doing that, it's like it's never been done. It's, reality, like training, they don't teach it. If you're a cop and you try to do that and you shoot like that and you get into a shooting, it's probably not going to go well for you, right? You're not going to be accountable for your marksmanship. Then the department's going to ask you, why were you doing that? Was that something that you were trained, right? So that's a problem, right? And so, you couldn't put I couldn't put 5 targets in a room at variable distances, moving, stationary, target availability, and any of these individuals enter the room with their rifle underneath their arm and hit all of their shots. Okay, and when you can't do that, we have a problem. Okay, and the problem is that we're trying to, I don't know, whatever the reason is, but it's not a big deal to put it out. Okay, because you think it's cool or you want to do it, because everybody has the right to do what they want. The problem is when somebody else brings up what I think are valid opinions to the contrary. It's a very defensive, you know, I want to say almost like an attack in a way, because they feel like the person that they've built themselves up to be and the person that they want people to know them for is being threatened. And that's not the case. It has everything to do with the information. It has nothing to do with you. And actually, when I make a video showing, hey, this is what's kind of being done, and this is kind of considerations that you want to have, it's when you go after the individual, or you say these things, it's it makes that thing about them, and that's part of the problem, right? It's an idea. We're talking about an idea. Yeah, a lot of ego in this world. Let me read these real quick. He wasn't vert to my eye. Bullet ricochet is dangerous. You can see from second threshold he's shooting. Yeah, which is why I think he struck the threshold. If you are working with teams, it's dangerous. I think it's definitely something to think about. But I guess my other question is, how do we actually not, like, what is the solution, right? Is it don't set up crisscross? Because you can't get both your muzzles inside the threshold if you're set up crisscross. That's going to be a whole nother problem. Don't you think that by making that panoramic movement, the bad guy has a lot of advantage with what's with FX? He always wins. Are you saying with like a force on force? Well, I assume that he's making that movement across the threshold like that because he feels like he has to go fast because there's something driving him to go in there, right? What you saw him doing was a dynamic movement. When I say dynamic, I just mean because of speed. And the only time in which you will do that, like law enforcement side, right, or even civilian side, active shooter, hostage rescue. And actually, an active shooter is a hostage rescue, right? Because our goal is to, as quickly as possible, mitigate him from being capable of continuing to cause harm to other people. So we have to kind of get there fast. And so we don't have time to kind of pan this slow pan. But yeah, I mean, sure, I agree. Yeah, you are in more danger, right? If the bad guy, and that's another thing too, if you hear the shooting, well, then he's not shooting at you, right? If you're coming up to the threshold and you hear shooting going on already, he's not shooting at you. He's probably occupied, right? So we probably can do that fast. And if the situation was just different, you may not want to do that because, like you said, yeah, it does put you at a disadvantage. Why? Because you, as a, reasonable, accountable person, have to clearly identify, what it is that you're engaging, which takes time, okay? It's about like 0.35 seconds to see something, react to it, move to it, and then initiate your process to get the thing done, right? So they actually don't have that problem, right? Because they're actually just shooting everything that's moving, right? And so that places you behind, right? A factor if he's actually waiting for you, not really a factor if he's not. But they're two different missions. You could go fast because you need to, and then you can kind of, slow and methodical. The video that I'm working on, I guess it'll probably be for next week, is kind of that, where I just basically discuss, it's a switching shoulders video, but it's basically discussing the different mission sets for law enforcement and when we actually move fast. Yeah, there's a lot of ego in this world. Yeah, it's true. For me, make standoff distance. Yeah, he was drilling solo stuff. That was fast, as you noticed. Dynamically, after he commits, he still needs to cover a lot of the room. Yeah, but he it is dangerous. I mean, but that's not like, I think a lot of people see videos too and they just like make assumptions like, oh, you walk past that door, like, oh, how could you? And it's like, that's not even the video. The video is just me moving from here to here. Like, there's a lot of things that people like to imply in videos. I think maybe if you don't have the training and experience, you don't really know what you're seeing, right? And that's why in the beginning of the video, I pointed out what that was. He was, you know, demonstrating how you would engage targets within your sector as you're seeing them as the one man, right? He could have done it without targets and he would have done it the same way. There just would have been no shooting. The good thing about having targets in the room, like you see in some of my videos, and people have commented too, like, oh yeah, well, you're not gonna, oh yeah, there's gonna be that many guys in the room. It's like, it's not the point of the video, that this is a realistic thing. I'm engaging these targets so you know where I'm looking so that you're able to see the scanning process. And that's exactly what he was doing. So I was currently in Ukraine, and in my personal experience doing CQB, my biggest takeaway is every single engagement is completely different. Be as deliberate as possible. Yeah. I agree. And by the way, if you can find somebody with credentials that's been fighting in Ukraine and can get a hold of me, I'd love to talk to them. Have them on the podcast. Obviously, you have to provide credentials and proof that these people are legit. But yeah, look, I mean, there is the pendulum is falling. I can't even say swinging back because it never really started as a slow and deliberate thing. CQB in the United States was always a, how fast can we take over this house? How much can we, how many diversionary devices and tactics can we use on this thing and overwhelm this structure as quickly as possible? That's basically where it started, right? And then what happened is like people were getting hurt, people were getting shot. And, one thing we talk about in that podcast is the standard, when the standard exists, right? Now, I won't mention who this group is, but you guys know who they are. One of the things that one of the persons says often that I like a lot is, would you do what you just did if you knew there was a guy in the room with a gun, right? And I think that in and of itself is going to check you 90% of the time, okay? Now, there does become a point where you don't know, like you've done everything you can, so now it's time to do something, right? And so I think kind of implying that now would definitely change the tempo and then the things that we would do. But I would actually like to make that statement better. Would you do what you're going to do if the bad guy started shooting at the first available opportunity where he thought that he could hit you, right? And so what does that mean? Okay, that means as soon as I work the door, right? If I'm a bad guy in a room and I want to hurt people and I don't want them to hurt me, I'm going to start shooting as soon as I see movement on the door. Maybe if I hear people outside of the door and I believe that I could be effective, I might do it then too, right? And so that's kind of, okay, let's talk about riding doors into rooms. I made a video about that. Would you do that if you knew the guy was going to start shooting at the door? The answer has to be no, okay? Because, if you did that, two operators got shot before the third guy even gets in there to see what's going on, okay? So that's really, something that Near stressed in the podcast is that's really where it starts. Like, and if you find yourself doing something that doesn't accommodate that, then you're just basically saying, well, if no one's in here, it doesn't matter. And that is also true. So you can actually kind of do whatever you want in those situations. If you guys are kind of enjoying the stream, do me a favor and take a second and drop a like in the stream so we could try to reach more people. Let me see what else I got. Anyway, John said it was more focused on demonstrating. Correct. That's what I said. Sometimes you do something that would only work in that specific scenario you're in. That's true. What's your camera name? Are you asking me like what my camera is that I'm viewing, you're seeing me on? If that's your question, let me know and I'll answer it. Or I'll just answer it. It's a Sony ZV-E10. It's like the model. It's like $900 camera, but it's like the model you get before you get an actually good camera. So I have a lens on there though. It comes with a stock lens, but I have I can't. I wish I could see the latest comment, but I can't because this thing is blocking it. I'll just create something like this stream, more accounts like this stream or something. I'm not sure. I don't know why you said that, but that's okay. All right, let's play this. So the reason that I clicked on this, okay, is this, right? Go on the Instagram. I don't know if it's probably not the most recent video that I did, but it's one of the most recent ones where I demonstrate switching shoulders, which is the whole purpose of my next video. But I gave the demonstration, the example, etc., and had people reaching out to me, and special forces guys, well-respected guys, and one of them said that they are like, yeah, I like most of the stuff that you put out, but this has to go. And we went on this long conversation about switching shoulders, and I'll just say, like, you'll see kind of like the common sense part of that in the video that comes out. But in that video, like I like to do, I like to kind of see what's out there, judge it based on what I know, based on my training experience, what I think makes most sense. And it turns out a lot of really highly trained guys have the same, thoughts as I do. They teach the same things as I do. And it becomes very, very odd when, what I say on Instagram is like, you should be careful on which hills you're deciding to die on, okay? And that's why I don't get emotional in that way and really, really stand up for what I believe in, because it's not necessary. I could just provide the information. And to me, the information to people who can think logically and will gravitate towards what they think is the better explanation. Okay, if nobody's providing you an explanation on this topic, and I am, and then I provide that, and then other people just kind of say, oh, that's not right because this, and that, and the other. Okay, well, that's okay. It's just not all that valuable because you're not showing us anything, right? And so that could, that would be helpful. But in this video, I used Ronin, right? I just went and Googled switching shoulders, found several special forces guys that were talking about it, training it, etc. Now, Ronin's bio is actually hard to kind of find. He doesn't really have like an about me. So I had to go Google and basically came up with interviews that he had given where he talked about, who he was and what he's done. And it's a lot of good stuff, a lot of things that I think most men in the industry or most men of equal, caliber would say, like, oh, he knows what he's talking about, or he has good information, or at least respect him on the things that he's done and say, okay, well, the things that he has some relevancy to the things that he's teaching. Okay. And that's kind of the way that I would think as well. However, the messages that I got from these other people that are also in that community basically called out every person that I use as an example and just said they are not good examples. We'll just say that. Like, they haven't actually done it enough or whatever. And it's just like, it's very peculiar to me, right? And ultimately it kind of like lands on this idea of like, you don't know who to trust. You don't know who to get your information from, right? You're looking at it, you think it's valid and you kind of make sense and you're reflecting on it. And then these other people are telling you, no, don't listen to him. His stuff's no good. And, one of the people that I brought up for the switching shoulders, which is a SEAL Team 6 guy, Trey Lindsay's his name. He teaches it. He's not only SEAL Team 6 for 13 years, but also is a chief of police somewhere. And he teaches that thing for probably a reason. And he showed videos or pictures, I guess, of officers getting, not getting killed because they switch shoulders. And, if you want to talk to somebody, and a lot of these guys in the community, they want to talk to me about this, right? They want to talk to a patrol officer who, I have my own training experience, prior military. They want to have a conversation with me. They don't want to have a conversation about the idea. They want to get me on something so that they can say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I've done all these things. Well, that's not really helping anybody. Go talk to the guy who was on SEAL Team 6 for 13 years, who teaches it, and have that conversation. I don't think that conversation will happen because that conversation is problematic, right? Highly trained individual absolutely trashing the idea, right? And anybody associated with it. Also having a conversation, which would actually be more like a conversation with somebody who was 13 years SEAL Team 6, now Chief of Police, teaches it. Wouldn't everybody want that conversation to happen? I believe so. But it probably won't, because what happens is you get two highly trained people with opposing opinions, and it's just a problem, right? It's kind of like, if you're in the military or even in law enforcement, it's very rare that you would have somebody, let's say a lieutenant, telling a sergeant, like in front of subordinates that, yeah, that's not right. We're not doing that. That's wrong, right? They don't do that. They usually, keep it civil, don't really display that they don't agree, and then maybe behind the scenes they're saying other things. Catch you later, liked and sub. Cool. He was deployed here in the Philippines and got to play a role working with our Tier 1 units, as I know. Let me see. Do you have issues switching shoulders with your sling? You just have to put it around your neck. Like, that's the only way to do it. And the answer when you do that is no. I think it's minimizing exposure is the thumbnail on my channel. If you go look at that video, you'll see I demonstrate how to do it. Let's see here. He's a great guy with the 1st Special Forces Group. He was attached to the CAG for a while too. It's all about experience and knowing what works and what not, and the why. Yes, I agree. And I think like in one of the videos that I'm kind of thinking about doing, it's going to take a little bit of time, is making a video about the military versus law enforcement. Because, when I'm talking to some of these individuals, or some of these people are saying like, you have to go fast. If you're not going fast, you're dead. If you don't go fast, then you've lost the element of surprise, and like it's not CQB at that point. It's like, we really don't have any idea what cops are doing out on the street, do we? Right? We have no idea what situations they involve themselves in, and what actually they need to have in place before they actually do anything at all. And so one of the things that Neer talked about, and I think it's really true. And I think it's true. It's truer. I think is the word. It's truer to the idea of this. What's supposed to happen is dynamic entry. What never happens is dynamic entry. That's what Neer said about what he was told the soldiers in Israel were supposed to be doing, but they actually weren't doing it. And if you go watch some of those videos, you also get the idea that they're not doing it because it's not practical. Okay. There's a number of videos where they're throwing grenades in rooms, throwing grenades from outside, they're cross coverage shooting, jumping in front with a machine gun, shooting into the room. They're trying to navigate through all this rubble and all these things on the floor, these just trash and debris and all this stuff. It's like, you're not moving fast through there. Like, you're literally going to run into a room and just be combat ineffective because you can't walk. And so I think that, like, more now than previously, that this whole idea of moving dynamically is super unique, super rare, super niche. And most law enforcement agencies, even SWAT teams, are not doing it. Okay. I have a group of SWAT guys that I ask from around the country. Don't know exactly where they're all from, but I ask questions. And one of the things they're not doing is moving dynamic on narcotic search warrants, because they don't value the narcotics that they may or may not find over their own life. And so, they also identify that, right? And so, yeah, I just think that it's a fallacy. Like, this dynamic entry and movements, it sometimes it has to happen. But oftentimes, like, if you walk into my front door and you try to clear this stuff moving dynamically, you're going to freaking hurt yourself probably. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. There's cameras, there's lighting, there's a table, there's cords everywhere. Now we're going to do the best that we can because we have to, but we're not really going to do that job effectively, right? You know, and if you look at officer involved shootings inside of structures, these dudes aren't, now I say this, when the bad guy is shooting first, okay, the bad guy is rarely ever just fully available for you to shoot him. I've seen videos where I've been trying to find this one video. The guy, they're trying to breach this door that's barricaded, and the guy shoots through the door, hits 2 cops, and he's basically underneath a mattress and underneath a bunch of stuff. Okay, that's a problem, right? These and they're shooting through the door, and I don't think they hit him or whatever, but there's just so many variables that you know, you have to account for. I also know that covert searching, I think in Israel they called them secure searches. Covert searching is not the same as moving dynamically. And just because you know how to move dynamically does not mean you know how to make decisions in a covert setting. And I don't say covert because like, oh, well, they don't know you're there, or they do know you're there or whatever. Covert is just an indication of how slow we're actually moving and trying to do things. Like there's things that I show people and talk to people about, and they're like, dang, I didn't think of that. And to me, it's just, I mean, to say it's an obvious thing. It's something that I learned that I didn't know prior to learning it. And you won't know it unless you're taught it. So that is not a relative argument that if you can move fast, then you can do anything slow. Because when you're moving slow, it's all about the decisions that you make. The best thing that we could be doing in this CQB environment is, you know, identifying and mitigating threats as soon as we perceive them or approach them. And we do that by pointing our gun at them. But the worst thing that we could do is enter a house that we've never been in and have to clear it fast. That sucks. You're going to drop things. You're not going to see everything, right? You're going to drop coverage. A guy's going to miss his thing. Like I was on a hostage rescue one, and the SWAT officer in front of me bypassed an open door to go to the next open door. So, and what happened was subsequently 4 or 5 other SWAT guys walked past this door that nobody checked. So I had to jump up in there and get in there. And so, yeah, it's not something that you want to have to do in a situation where a bad guy is trying to kill you, because it's not good. Dad, what's up, buddy? What is that? Uh-oh. Does it itch? Yeah. Let's see here. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Yes, it's something that they talk about. But I don't know how it applies to CQB really. It's not really something that necessarily people attribute to those two things. Hi to Jungkook. If you guys are listening to this and you're enjoying it, drop a like. That'd be helpful. Thanks. Do you support the way Israel is conducting its war? So I guess I'll answer that, even though I'm just a dude with 4 kids and a wife, trying to build something over here. You know, all these other countries are going to do what they want to do. Does not concern me. I don't really watch politics or try to involve myself in politics, because I've done that in the past, and it's a very kind of like a roller coaster of an emotional thing that doesn't really need to be a part of my life. And again, you know, these politicians are going to do whatever they want to do, and they're going to make decisions that are in their best interest. And I'm just here, you know. But do I support here? And actually, Nir wanted to probably get on a podcast and talk about Hamas and Israel and Palestine and all that. And this is all I know, okay? Well, not all I know, but I'm going to tell you what makes sense to me, okay? On October 7th, a bunch of terrorists went into that country. You could argue, well, it's not their land or whatever. I don't care, okay? A bunch of bad people went over, you know, had this plan. They dug tunnels. They launched a whole bunch of rockets. They had observation balloons. And they walked into people's houses and slaughtered them, right? And they went to a concert and slaughtered people, like kids, right? They abducted women, children, people, took them hostage. And so I don't really care what your religious preferences or what you believe in, but I think we can all agree that's pretty heinous. And people that do something like that probably don't need to be on this planet. And so if that means going next door and turning it into a parking lot, to get our people back and to kind of say, hey, look, you guys have been doing this for a long time. We're kind of done with it. And this was the biggest hostage rescue that's ever happened in the history of, ever, right? Well, maybe I'm implying, but you get the idea. And so I don't really care about this country or that country or who believes in what. All I know is a bunch of bad dudes went and killed a bunch of innocent people and did a bunch of terrible things, and that has to be kind of dealt with, and they've chosen to do that. If that answers your question. Why rush to your death? Good question. The war is not the topic. You are correct. Factual. Would it be appropriate to stop that officer before passing the door? What are you talking about? You have to, maybe I talked about something and that's what you're asking me. I don't know. You'd have to re-ask the question. I'm not sure what you're talking about. I only asked because you spoke with an Israeli soldier. That's fine. It's a okay question. I'm not going to speak to like Hamas, I'll tell you that. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That phrase is often misunderstood by people. Yeah, I agree. Well, I don't know if I agree, but I think it could be. For me, it's about moving at a speed where you can process information. That's a good point, okay? Let's talk about that. Because I made a video. It didn't do well, right? But the premise is still there. It says for the gram. It's me standing there like this. That's just like, I don't remember what the title says. But basically, and this happened to me all the time when I would see people entering rooms. The guy in front of me, right? So a corner-fed room, the guy in front of me, instead of, realistically entering the room and collapsing the room down, which happens at a certain speed, okay? And that speed is how fast you can positively identify, targets and process the information in which you're seeing. And oftentimes what guys do as the number one in there, they walk in and they immediately snap to the corner, right? Why do they do that? Well, because that's, if you don't, typically in like a situation where an instructor sets up a scenario, that's usually where they put the targets or the bad guys when it's a corner fed room and you don't see them right there, right? And so people, that's how they train. Like people are going into these situations, they're going, oh, I didn't see him here. Boom, he must be over here. And you actually just like gave up your whole responsibility of what you're supposed to be doing. It's the other person's responsibility to be hitting that corner before you even get your gun around probably to identify it. And in that video, I basically demonstrate what it looks like when you're actually scanning the room. And that's another reason why you really want to do it as much as you can from the outside first, because when you're entering these rooms, you really can't be doing that, right? You're giving up your responsibility. Whereas if you did it from outside, you kind of know, at least with a degree of certainty, that nobody isn't there because he's not shooting at you and you don't see him. Okay, now we can actually enter the room with our gun kind of oriented that way. And so I've done this actually a lot, where with simunition, but if you have, like I have the Mantis Blackbeard Mantis X, set up targets. It's better if you can have somebody set up random targets for you in the room, maybe the same target, but just repositioning it for you. And what you do is you walk from one side, you're blind, you can't see what's inside the room, and you pick a starting point and you walk across that threshold and you try to engage that target as you're moving across, okay? And what you'll find is that the speed in which you could accurately do that, it's not really fast. Like it's not as fast as most people do that, because what you don't kind of want to happen, unless that's part of your plan, is move so fast across the threshold that you miss up the first opportunity to shoot the guy. Now he's shooting the guy behind you who's just now seeing it. And so what I believe is like that is actually not something you could do fast realistically. And doing it fast is going to lead to you being less accountable with your marksmanship. But that was a good point. Let's see here. I agree that October 7th was a war crime, but that wasn't the question. Plus, it's been going both ways for a long time. Okay, I don't know. What was your question? Do I support the way Israel's conducting the war? I don't really know how they're conducting the war, really. I mean, I see what they're doing. I mean, it's war. They're doing war things. There's only one real way to wage a war. Like, it's terrible. Like, it's a bad thing. Like, innocent people are dying. And that's not good. But it's at a certain point, we got to stop the bleeding. You know what I mean? But I get what you're saying, I guess. But anyways, enough about that. I got a medal. I don't know what that is, but thank you. Saw a clip of Kyle Morgan and Blue Bearings talking about wearing your sling properly and to not necklace it. Wondering what your thoughts are in relation to the ease of switching shoulders. I don't know if you asked that question earlier. Don't think so. I'm scanning the chat back and I don't see that you've asked a question. So I guess you weren't the one that asked that. I made a video about switching shoulders. It's called minimizing exposure. And in that video, I demonstrate how to do it. Here is the problem with not wearing it like a necklace. Okay. The problem is that you have to retain your rifle. Okay, you have to have a way of securing it to your body. And I'm not saying like securing it in the best way. I mean, when your rifle doesn't work, you will not throw it to the ground when it's not around your body. Okay, and that's a problem, right? Because if we're in such close proximity to bad guys and our rifle all of a sudden does not work, what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to transition. Okay, we can't do that if it's not slung. Why? Because you will not do it, right? I mean, at least I won't. I know no military person will. And most trained people won't do that, which forces you to have to try to fix the problem with your rifle when there's probably a faster solution, which is transitioning to your pistol. Well, that could be a faster solution. And so I don't know. Like can't really answer your question. The only thing I'm going to say is it has to be slung to you in some way, right? So when I teach my vehicle class and everything that I've ever taught anybody or have talked about or believe in came from, I've also messed up. I've done the wrong thing. But when I've done these things, it didn't cost me anything because I'm sitting right here talking to you. And so that's what I tell my students. And so one of the things that we talk about is slinging your rifle. And when we are getting ready to do these takedowns in our vehicles, your rifle has to be slung. I don't tell them how to do it. I give them different ways that they could do it. And I say, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is that you can retain it. Because when it goes to you go to use it and it doesn't work, you're in a situation, okay, that is going to be very difficult to get yourself out of. And so it has to be slung. I don't care if it's around your neck or not. But when it doesn't work, I have to be able to release it. And I can't do that unless it's attached to me. The only thing that I can think of as an alternative is a 1-point sling, which I have run in the past and I think is okay under certain situations, but I have, in the past 7-8 months or so transitioned to a 2-point sling because it just fits what I'm doing now. It's more applicable. It's, more versatile. I have a video on slings, 1-point slings too, somewhere on the YouTube channel. So it has to be slung to you. If they have a solution for that, that's better. Then that's fine. But what's exactly is the issue with having it around your neck, right? I think I've heard people like, oh, if somebody grabs your rifle and they're pulling on it, again, we're kind of talking about irrelevant things, okay? Nobody's grabbing on people's rifles on average. And what's more concerning is when I go to shoot it and it doesn't work, that's a problem. People working in rooms for the first time during training, their brain gets fed with lots of information like dealing example of multi-fed rooms and they freeze or brain fog. Agree, right, true, yeah. So would you tackle a multi-room CQB situation? So let me kind of talk about this. Look, let's say you're on the catwalk, and the catwalk is this area above a CQB house or a simunition house or a live fire house where you can observe from a bird's eye view what's happening inside of the house, right? So you get to stand there and you get to look at what these officers or whoever is doing, how they're clearing these things. And what you're saying is you see people training for the first time, their brain gets fed with lots of information, right? That's true. So what happens is let's say you see a group of guys go in there and say you're trained and you kind of know basics and you don't see the things happening that need to happen, right? You see confusion. People don't have their guns up. People are not holding coverage on things, right? What you're seeing, it's not like, well, you might say they suck and maybe they do suck, but actually what you're seeing is they are being exposed to too many problems that they don't have solutions for, okay? So when you see trained people going into these rooms or moving around, on the contrary, and it looks like they're relatively doing good, you're seeing a bunch of trained guys that have solutions for these problems, okay? And that's the difference between the two. And I mean, it's not brain fog. It's just they don't have the answers to the problems. And so they don't know. They just don't know. So would you tackle a multi-room CQB situation? I mean, you might have to, but I don't really understand what you mean by that. Like if I go into one room, there's other rooms, or you're looking down my hallway, actually you'll see in the next video, right? And I guess my question to you is, what is a CQB situation, right? And I think I say this, CQB is purposeful conflict in close proximity. Okay. So it's whatever you decide close proximity is to you. That is what CQB is. CQB has kind of been hijacked to only mean dudes with rifles and plate carriers clearing an objective. Okay. It's just not by definition what it means. Okay. They even refer to CQB also meaning, going back to like jungle warfare and things like that. And so that's kind of the first thing, right? Purposeful conflict, close proximity. That's what CQB is. So could that be in a parking lot around vehicles and be called CQB? It actually is CQB, but people don't refer to it as that being the case, okay? So we kind of have to get over that hurdle and just be able to say, call it for what it is. Because when people say CQB, they basically mean stacking up, clearing all these rooms, right? Fast. We'll just say that. So, look, you may have to clear a multiple room situation quickly. It's a rescue active shooter. So to answer your question, yes, right? In the video that's going to come out, I basically explained like, okay, looking down this hallway, there's all these closed doors, and we believe that there's a guy in this room with a gun. We're not moving. We're not going in there. We're not getting a squeeze and clearing these rooms as fast as we can. That's not what we're doing. And so once you understand that, I think that kind of better answer your question. You might have to. You don't want to have to. There's in law enforcement side, there's other tools and things that we can use to, try and better our situation. And look, there's no way to do it. Okay. Like, yes, here's fundamental principles, how to clear these rooms that are set up in this way in this ammunition house that are set up in this way. These targets are set up in this way. Here's a way of doing things. These are fundamental principles. But if you go, in the upstairs, which you'll see in the next video, and you're looking down the hallway, now let's just say we clear that like CQB style, right? And all the doors are closed. There's a door on the right, a little bit farther, door on the left closed, door straight ahead closed, and door off to the right over here closed. So there's 4 closed doors. So if we were going to clear these with, let's just say we have 4 guys, how would we do that? Well, we would probably work that door from our side, the closest side, because again, pushing ourselves out past the door to look at other closed doors is not great. We could do it. We could stand there and pretend like we're doing something, but we're really not, okay? Can't clearly identify what we're trying to hit. And once the shooting starts, what happens? We kind of just react to that, get the hell out of there, and we probably don't want to shoot at what we can't see. So if I'm thinking about it logically, how I would want to do that, keep everything in front of us, we would try to work that door from, I guess, the knob side that's closest to us. We would get that door open, and, you have an option. You could dump into the room, or because these doors are closed, you could, I guess you probably couldn't do this. But I was going to say you could try to pry that door off with somebody covering along, but I don't think you could in that situation. So here's another situation where you could do this. And I'm not saying it's wrong. You could say, look, these doors in front of me are closed. The door I have on my right is open. Dumping into this room is an option, or you could also pie that by yourself, right? That kind of sucks because you're leaving yourself in the wind, but you also have to understand that even if somebody is there protecting you while you're doing that, they can't shoot at anything anyways, probably. You know, a decision has to be made at that point, and if you're going to do any of those things, you better have a shield with you, okay? Because then that kind of helps us make a little bit better decisions that way. But those rooms are being taken in a methodical way, right? We're not getting a squeeze and oh, go in here, go across. There is no way. I would love to see any of these groups. Pick your group. There is no group that would allow me, like at some point in my life or career or the growth of this thing, allow me to set up a situation, right? And also record it from a bird's eye view, and then also publish, saying, hey, this is who these guys are, clearing that structure. They wouldn't allow that to happen because it would look like terrible, right? Because there's just so much stuff that you can't account for. And although we put ourselves in positions where we believe that we're doing something, we're really not doing a whole lot. At that point, we're just throwing bodies in rooms. And they're not going to let you publish something that makes them look like they don't know what they're doing. It's not that they don't know what they're doing. It's just that it wouldn't look good, okay? So I don't know if I answer your question, really. How would you tackle a multi-room CQB? It just depends. Like I have to know what it looks like. But I can tell you this, okay? The best thing that you could do with the individuals that are in this location is be able to see what the next problem is and make an educated decision based off the information that you have, the tools that are available to you. There's a bunch of things that you could do absent of technology that I won't get into. But that is the best thing. Why is that the best thing? Is because we've never been in here before. We don't know what this looks like. The worst thing we could do is start going in here and trying to clear things and point our guns in all these directions without actually having to try and clear it. Like how many times have you ended up in a hallway and you're looking at an open door right here, an open door here, and a closed door over here, and you're just doing one of these. Like it's great, you're doing something, but it's not actually being effective. You just don't know that because nothing's actually happening. But if we can come up with a plan, which is what I've done a lot in the past with the team that I was on, is we would be standing there, we would be in this room here looking out into the rest of the house, and we would literally be talking about what we're going to do, okay? Maybe we have multiple shields. Hey, pin that door on the right. We're going to clear over here to the left. Now, we can do all that stuff absent of communicating it and absent of seeing it, but then we're just kind of going based off of our training and experience and fundamental principles. It's just not the best way, or that you could do it, if that makes sense. Priority direction of clear is a thing. What is the most difficult CQB situation you have ever had to deal with? So look, this is the worst. This is actually the worst thing that can happen is there's a lot of solutions to a lot of problems, but then there's also situations where you have to make the best decision that you can, even though it sucks, right? And so just like being on a small team, like in a big city, at the time, by the way, there's 36 likes in here. If you guys want to help out the channel, drop some likes, that'd be helpful. So being on a small team and not having resources other than us and maybe a shield and some mechanical tools and things like that we've used, you enter a structure looking for a person. First of all, the worst thing, looking for somebody who may or may not be there. Okay, that's the worst thing, okay, because they could be literally hiding anywhere, right, in a defensive position waiting to shoot you. That's in and of itself, that's the worst CQB situation you could probably be in. Okay, if the guy's sleeping on a couch, nobody cares. If the guy's running out the back and tries to jump a fence, okay, but in these situations where cops get shot, this is where they get shot, right? Searching for somebody who may or may not be there. Anyways, so here's one example, right? So we made entry. By the way, we breach and hold, call out, no response, move up, breach. After we breach that, back up. Don't stay by the breach point. Do more calling out, nothing. Now we move forward and we're going to make entry. So we make entry, small kitchen, clear that, holding on the dining room, and then the living room is adjacent to it, and then down a long hallway. So we clear those big rooms, and now we're looking at this long hallway. And if I remember it correctly, it's just an open door to the left and two doors at the end of the hallway opposing that are both open. Okay. And so we clear the small bathroom and come back out, look at it some more. I mean, I'm standing there behind my team looking at this, trying to determine how can we do this? Like, how could we, try to mitigate, a threat from both directions? And, if I could do it, what I would probably do is try to close one of those doors, right? That way, again, is it covered? No, but it does psychologically affect that person's ability to engage you because they don't see you. And then they're going off what they perceive, which again is still better than getting shot in the face, in my opinion. But if I could have closed one of those doors, I probably would have done that. That kind of, in a sense, eliminates that one side of being the immediate threat. And let's just say we had 4 guys. We would move down the hallway, and we would probably, up until the last point, kind of work that one opening clear doorway. And then that person, when he gets the chance, he would go in, and then 2 would go in. And then the third guy would probably pin the door with the shield, or you could send the shield over to the open room, whichever one. But in this case, we couldn't do that, right? And so you're standing there looking at this, and this is a common practice. This is kind of just what happens. This is one of those situations you can't, even though you can't account for it. There's no good answer to this problem. And what do we end up doing is what most people would probably guess we did, which is take them simultaneously. What does that mean? That means we're sending 2 people into one room, and then 2 people into the other room. We say simultaneously, but it's not really happening simultaneously. Once these 2 people clear, the next person's going in. Why does that suck? Well, because if the guy was in one of the rooms, let's just say he was in the opposite room shooting at our guy's back, well, they're getting shot in the back as the third guy's still trying to get up there to do that. And so I don't know, that's without but that is, those situations are the worst because you're standing there looking at it and you're like, man, this sucks. I wish I had a solution for this. I really don't. How do I mitigate, us getting hurt or killed? And man, look, I've looked at this long enough. There's not much we can do. This is the way it has to be done. It's the way it has to be done, right? We could maybe take somebody outside and breach another window, right? As we're making entry into those rooms as a diversion. But those situations they're the worst because there's no good solution to that problem. Okay, official Rivera, that's cool. I'll check it out when I get to my phone. Crap. Okay. True. CQB is close combat or engagement. That's basically it from jungle to urban. Correct. Vehicle CQB seems to be the new trending term. Makes a lot of sense, though a lot of our work revolves around vehicles, especially high-risk events. Yes, I have a class. Now, I've been completely transparent with everything I've done, the information I've come to, and so I've said this before, I'll just say it again. All of the things that you hear me talking about or doing, I got into this industry or Instagram or YouTube or whatever 2 years ago, and I was, let's say, 32 at the time, and in the Marine Corps, nuclear security officer, and on the department, I guess at that time, probably 6 to 7 years, TAC team patrol, etc. And so I literally started this stuff and the courses that I teach based off of just my own belief system. What I believed in, what I thought of. I did not even know about these other people. Literally had no idea. I was not involved in the industry, didn't have Instagram for business. I still have, I guess, an Instagram that was a personal one I hadn't used it in probably 10 years. If I had I'm not going to look it up, but phone's behind me. I don't remember the last time I used it. I deleted it. And so really kind of walked into all this stuff blind, didn't know of anybody. didn't really pay attention on YouTube. Those kind of things weren't the stuff that I was into. I just knew what we were doing at the time and felt like I had solutions to these problems. And one of them was essentially this vehicle stuff, right? Officers more likely to get into an engagement in or around your vehicle. And so I developed, I guess you could say, this course called High Risk Vehicle Encounters. When I came up with that name and that idea, I didn't know who Will Petty was. I didn't know about any other courses out there, and still really don't. I mean, I know of them, kind of just know what I hear, but I didn't. I luckily didn't pick the same name. That'd be weird. But didn't even know vehicle CQB was a thing or existed, or terminology, right? And so I think vehicle CQB is just a name. It's just a name for a thing. Just like my course is called High Risk Vehicle Encounters, right? I guess, yeah, if it's CQB or it's close proximity and it's, what is it? Purposeful conflict in close proximity, then yeah, I guess it is CQB. So it's fine. Like, the name is fine. It matches what it is. It really does. There's other things about vehicles that, well, I teach what I teach because it's what I believe in, and I've come to my conclusions, per se conclusions based off of, officers' body cams, my own training and experience. And so I don't know what they teach in that class, but I will say that part of my class is teaching officers about the inconsistencies of shooting through your windshield and why it's probably not a good idea. And I have body cam after body cam after body cam that I play, and my solution to this problem is giving them the information they need to deliver the round accurately at the first available opportunity to do that with a high degree of accountability. Okay. And we do that by clearing our muzzle, basically, right? I don't care what other people are teaching. It does not bother me any. Go for it. It's just not, I think that, and I've been through a counter ambush class, right? Not by them, right? And I don't see a lot of the, I have conversations with, SWAT guys about this, and we think the same way. It's, when you're training, you should be training to set realistic expectations. Okay. That means whatever you're doing in training, you should be expecting to do that same thing in real life. If that's not the case, then you really have to question what it is you're doing, right? So we train to develop familiar processes so that we can fall back on those processes when it's time to do the thing. Okay. And so if I set up 5 cars, different heights, SUVs, trucks, whatever, and different year models, and we shot one round through that windshield at variable distances at targets moving, you probably wouldn't hit the target, okay? Then there's a bunch of other stuff that comes into play that you're supposed to do, right, that they teach you in the counter ambush class to be able to deliver rounds. It's just not a practical thing. You can find the most highly trained people in the United States, say SWAT guys, getting into shootings from their vehicle, shooting through the windshield. They actually train to shoot through their windshield more than anybody else, although on average, maybe once a year, which is another conversation we have in our class. And they're not doing these things. They're not punching their muzzle through. They're not, shooting through the same hole. We can't do that if the dude's moving. And so all of these things that we're doing is probably delaying us to delivering accurate rounds, right? We're spending all this time doing something we don't know will work. I favor doing the thing immediately that we know we can guarantee. So that's kind of that. I have a conversation. First thing I ask the students in my class about when I get on the vehicle topic is, how many in here have trained shooting through their windshield? Usually everybody raises their hand. How many have done it once? Usually everybody keeps their hand up. How many have done it twice? Hands start falling. 3 times, hands start falling. And then by 3 or 4, you got nobody that's raising their hand anymore. Okay, so the point that I'm making here is that by the very nature of training and developing processes, you're not training the thing that you are resorting to in real time. That's a problem, okay? You have no foundational understanding of what you're trying to do. And it's just true. And if you're not going to accept a target on the range, right, that is, you missed it, you hit him where you weren't expecting to, a fully available target through your windshield that's moving at 7 yards, and it's not something that you would accept on the range, then you shouldn't accept it in real life. I play a video where I actually set up cars and set up vehicles in a certain way, and bumper to bumper had a SWAT guy shoot at this moving target, fully available, shot 4 rounds and missed all 4. Okay, so anyways, on to the next one. Is airsoft CQB any good for training as a 16-year-old wanting to enlist in the future? Like, look, I'm just gonna tell you this, but because you're 16, the answer is no. And I'm saying that because I was, I guess, like 26 or so, and I learned a different way of doing CQB that was the right way of doing it that I did not know before I started doing it that way. Because the military is just going to teach you different things, right? More or less. And if you're not a special forces guy, or you're on a line platoon, or you're, light infantry, you're going to get training that isn't probably good. It's going to always start with a grenade. And, I don't know what they're teaching now, but like, to be quite honest, CQB was not a big part of my training when I was in the infantry. We did it, but there was a lot of other things like moving in the open, using cover, land navigation, like all these other things. So, I would say, like, there's a video actually where TRX Arms has a guy on the range who never shot a real gun before, and he shoots airsoft. He only shot airsoft, like, really good, right? And so he ends up basically getting to, like, above the average police officer level with a real gun very quickly. So there are definitely some things that are applicable. But the problem with airsoft just in general, which I'm going to have a guy on the podcast who I use his facility to train. I'm going to talk with him about the airsoft stuff, and we're going to discuss the relevancy basically of it. And the issue is that most people don't treat airsoft like it's real, and therefore you shoot a lot and you don't care, and you shoot before you go into rooms and you don't care. And so I would say just have fun, and if you're going to play airsoft, just play airsoft to win. And when you're doing things for competition to win, then you do things that you wouldn't do in real life. And so that's it. But don't worry about it translating to your life, because it's just not going to. There isn't anything actually that you can learn right now and think that that's going to be the way that you're going to be doing it in the next, let's just say you're 6 years. Okay. It's going to be something completely different. So you'll formulate, your thoughts and opinions and what's right and wrong based off whatever environment you're learning in and doing the thing for. How do I like the channel? I don't know how you like the channel, but there's a heart or like a 100 thing or whatever, like in the chat area. I think that's where you would drop a like to help the channel out. I don't know though. Recent worst case CQB, Uvalde, Texas Classroom, 112, plenty of videos on that situation. Yeah, but no. Like, that's a terrible situation, but that's not... I did videos on this. I've done several. Whole podcast episode on Uvalde and what actually happened. So, again, I've already talked about that, but I'll just say this, like... That's actually not the worst case scenario where you know where the guy is. It's a bad scenario. It's a bad situation that you don't really want to be involved in, period. But the worst situation is you don't know where he is, but you know he's in here. Because why? Why is that? Because there's so much stuff that you can't possibly account for in that situation. And in that situation with the bad guy in the room, what could that officer have done? Right? Nobody's trained there really on CQB. They've done active shooter, but nobody's proficient at CQB. And so let's say you are proficient at CQB. If you do go into that room, you're doing it by yourself, basically. You don't even know if other cops are going in there with you. So what you can do is you can work that threshold, right? Constant pressure. CQB is about keeping constant pressure. If he's shooting at you, he's not shooting at the kids. And that is at least a step towards progress. Let's see. Oh, you told him how to do it. Dots up or right, thumbs up option. Let's see here. I swear police must have flashbacks when they stop cars or see interior doors. I don't know what that means. But let's see. Sensi kinetic. Sensi. Yeah, something like that. What is your opinion on step center? I have a video on stepping center. Seems like I have a video on a lot of things, but it's good. It could direct you guys somewhere. So watch the video of. Let me see if I can look it up real quick for you. Don't remember the name of it. Oh, I think it's How to Die Faster is the thumbnail. How to Die Faster. I just put that in there. Or I just changed the thumbnail, so you should be able to find it relatively easily. How to Die Faster. Look, if you have to go into a room quickly, I don't care if you're going quick or not. You want to see as much of the room as you can before you go in. If you step center and the dude starts shooting at you there, guess what you're not doing? Going into the room, okay? You're going to, at best, try to get into a gunfight right there and win that gunfight. It's kind of absurd that you will go into a room without at least doing that, because the alternative is what you'll see in that video in the beginning, getting shot a lot and then never being available to deliver rounds anyways. An entire podcast, actually. I don't think you're referring to the Uvalde thing. Got it, man. I'll take airsoft CQB with a grain of salt. Do you informative videos on your channel for CQB or know any good sources? Yeah, big dog. Go to the channel and start watching. Like, all my recent videos are about CQB. And, I think they're good. I think you're right on there being good points to using airsoft and competition shooting to help you develop your skills as a shooter and a problem solver. They don't translate perfectly, but help. Yeah. I don't have time to get into the competition shooting thing, but it definitely can help you. Well, it should help you, obviously. I mean, make you better, faster shooter. And I'll just say before I hop off here that the problem is not obviously identifying that that's a benefit. The problem is that when those individuals who do that thing really well want to discredit absolutely anything else that exists, even if it's tactics, even if it's, okay, like, so what I teach a class called Exploiting Accuracy. What I do is I teach officers how to control their emotions. And it turns out that what you see in all these body cameras, which is, I think, obvious, right? What are cops doing? Pointing the gun and pulling the trigger until the thing that they're trying to get to stop stops, without regards to their sights, usually. Not everybody, but usually. That turns out to be 15 to 38% hit factor, hitting it all, whether it's shoulders, arms, pinky toe, doesn't matter. They're counting that 15 to 38%. And, since like 19th century, like policing, like officers' hit factor has only increased like marginally. Okay, so it hasn't really changed a whole lot. We're training more. We're shooting more. The training that we're getting is better. I don't care if it's not to the degree in which we want it to be, but it is better than what it's ever been. Okay, I know a lot of good dudes in a lot of places that are making things happen. Okay, that's great. But when I get cops in my class, doesn't matter what class it is, it's always the same. Put them in a situation. What do? They shoot the average hit rate out on the street, 15 to 38%. Okay, when exposed to a contextually relevant threat. And so what I do is I teach a little bit after that. And then what happens is go on my Instagram, look at the photos, the last class I posted, before and after. The one target is what that percentage, I don't remember what it was, let's say 21%. Afterwards, they're shooting 95%. So I'm not saying that these hard skills are not awesome to have. But if I can take you in a very short time frame and expose you to what you probably don't know is going to actually happen, teach you how to control it, and deliver these rounds exactly where you want them to, in like, I could do it very quickly, like 15 minutes even, right? To me, that holds a tremendous amount of value. It is the thing that is missing from what we're trying to do here. And shooting more and shooting faster and doing all these things isn't going to, it's not going to help. It's not even a solution to the problem. Why is it not a solution to the problem? Because how are we going to convince law enforcement, people that can make decisions that they need to make sure everybody's a competition shooter and getting all this ammo? So we're already advocating for something that's never going to happen. And so what that is just talking. That's all it is. Maybe along the way you encourage one person to go do the thing, but it's not something that's adoptable by organizations. All right, let's see here. We didn't get into this video, but I got to hop off. All my kids are home. I don't want to. So people don't take it for training, more of a game to be expected. Yeah, you're talking about airsoft, but yeah, that's true. You could use it in a training environment, though, which is something I'll get into at a different time. Somebody said, I've heard people say before, oh, like simunition is like paint rounds. Cops just treat it like paintball and whatever. And I personally never seen that happen. I got these guns behind me, got a case full of blue bolts and a bunch of ammo around here. No, cops don't treat it like paintball. Like they're like, oh man, these aren't real, so I can shoot a lot. No, they're shooting a lot and just hitting whatever in training because that's what they do in real life. Physiological responses are forcing them to do that. Anyways. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me for this stream. Sorry we didn't get into this other video. But if you guys haven't already and you want to like the video, share it with somebody, that'd be cool. That'd be helpful. I appreciate all your guys' interaction with my content. Whenever you see a video, if you want to help out the channel, playing the video from start to finish is very helpful. Liking the video, drop a comment. You could just say, hey, what's up? Or I like green crayons. That's cool. Doesn't really matter what it is. Or dislike it if you don't like it, or have a conversation within the comment section is all fine, good stuff. I appreciate you guys helping me grow this channel, and hopefully we can continue to do that.